morning, everyone.
Morning.
Hi, my name is Jason Kazanowski. I teach political science here at UM-Flint. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. All my students, I give extra credit for that. I'll give you extra credit. I'll give anyone extra credit. Anyway, I want to get started quickly because I think the previous speakers sort of said a lot of what I wanted to say, and really, I think, set a really excellent tone for the conference. So I would like to thank our introductory speakers. One thing in introduction, I wanted to begin with a quote by Detroit activist Grace Lee Boggs, which I really like. I used it in my last book, The Political Theory of Salvage, State University of New York Press, 2095. Amazon. She said, yeah, I just did that. She said, Detroit is a city of hope, rather than a city of despair. Thousands of vacant lots and abandoned houses provide not only the space to begin anew, but also the incentive to innovate ways of making our living, ways that nurture our productive, cooperative, caring selves. And the people on this panel have thought about, have done, have really embodied this quote and this sentiment. You know, I've been teaching at UM-Flint for 20 years, and needless to say, Flint has gone through a lot of trouble and difficulty and injustice, and it's always been a hopeful place to me. And I want to get our conversation started sort of talking about how other cities, institutions within our own city are really trying to embody the hope that I see and that Grace Lee Boggs saw all across the United States in what other people would call ruin, in the cracks. So let me just start by introducing our panelists, and then I'll ask you a question. In no particular order, we have Joe Guinan, president of the Democracy Cooperative. We have Esteban Kelly, who is the executive director of the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. And then we have Brigitte Brown-Jackson and Taylor Flynn of the North Flint Food Market. So thank you all for coming here. So let me just start with a question. And please feel free in any particular order. All of you are involved in advocating for or actually running co-ops and worker-run enterprises. What do you believe to be the largest advantages and difficulties in terms of the day-to-day operation of such enterprises? So anyway, we can go this way, if that's okay. Or...
I don't mind starting.
Yeah, go for it.
I feel like this is my question. So it's true, I, in addition to running the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, I'm the son of an entrepreneur, and I inherited some of those qualities, so I continue to start different cooperatives, and I've been involved in, not necessarily as a developer externally, but as an entrepreneur. So I've been involved in the last co-op I started as a freelancer co-op for 1099 gig workers. I did a co-op called Aorta, which is still around, it stands for Anti-Oppression Resource and Training Lines. And I was involved for 15 years while I was in graduate school, doing consulting for organizations, labor groups, nonprofits, dealing with everything from climate change to reproductive choice to community-based organizations, neighborhood bike projects, and so I've been involved from co-ops that were started long before I got involved in them. As a student is when I really first got involved as a worker owner in a co-op that was started in the 1930s, all the way up to ones that I just formed in 2020 is probably the most recent one that I started. So I do have a lot of different perspectives on this, and I think I usually start with the economic ones. And today I'll get to that, but I wanted to start with just a reminder about some of it's a public health issue, honestly, like some of the social alienation, isolation, the lack of, we live in this society that's been so hyper-individualized that it is now affecting ourselves, our mental health, our community, our relationships. And so I think actually starting with that like one of the best benefits day to day is just the social cohesion that immediately, it's a complete vibe shift. The idea of work, we have a whole story about work in our society. It's this thing that you don't want to do, but there's a wage, you can dangle the carrot. For my members, work is a thing that is joyful, like that they want to do. And it's not like propaganda, like, oh, we're all a family here, like come and dedicate your life to this, it'll be, but that actually it's, no, I have my friends also. This is not a proxy for community or family and friends, but it's yet another space where you can show up and participate with community people who see the dignity in the labor that you're doing, who are there to help and support you, and who check in, they care how you're doing as a person. And when there are problems, it's not that every workplace is a utopia. We all know that's not true, but that there is a process and it's a deliberative and democratic process for justice to happen, for there to be some balancing or accountability or something to be looked into, or for conflicts to be addressed and resolved in some way. And so all of those are things that even before you walk into your workplace, you already know if something goes off the rails, that there's gonna be a process to address it. So it's like everyone's shoulders just drop, knowing that that's part of the conditions of the workplaces that they're gonna be entering. But yes, there's also the economic things, right? It's lower, you're spreading out the risk if you're an entrepreneur. Not all worker co-ops are small startup entrepreneurial businesses. Many of my members are very large cooperatives in everything from transportation to home health care, manufacturing. But if you are stewarding a business, certainly if you're starting one, which is the financially riskiest part of it, 8 days of a business is those first 5 years when you're getting it off the ground, you're spreading that risk out. And so that's, one of the main benefits is that it's both that you're sharing in the rewards, if things are going well, if it's profitable, if you're able to get the business off the ground after those first challenging, difficult years. And then also, whatever the profits there are, you are sharing those. And because cooperatives have a democratic structure, it's not just about voice, it's about economic equality and participation. So it's one worker, one vote, and it means that profit sharing is equitable based on your membership. So some workplaces decide that it's based on the number of hours you work, and that's fine. It doesn't matter what wage you make, just the number of hours of labor that you put in. And for some, they just say, look, these are the profits, and you're an equal shareholder. Everyone is an equal shareholder. It's one share per worker, and so that's how the profits get distributed. And lastly, I think just remembering that cooperative businesses are businesses. So it's an asset, which means you can leverage that asset in any number of ways. I mentioned the mental health thing. Okay, you can leverage the asset of that community of support. Whether you're struggling personally or with a family tragedy or addiction or something else, whether you're struggling in your community around being hit by things like tariffs, being hit by things like rising healthcare costs, you can leverage that asset and say, well, what if we shop around, not individually on the Obamacare market, but what if we shop around with a broker for healthcare for our entire workplace? Or what if we use some of the resources of our business to subsidize things that are not part of the formal system, the healthcare system, like massages and physical therapy, or things that might be out of network. So there's a lot of ways of just like really repositioning what does it mean to have this extra asset in our lives, and given the political economy where there's just an attrition of owning very much of anything in our lives. So I think those are the main things that come to mind.
Does anybody else want to?
Sure.
Great. Well, for the ins and outs of co-ops, Esteban is definitely your man, and we're going to hear from Brigitte and Taylor about what this looks like in practice, where the rubber hits the road. So for me, I suppose the task is maybe to hold some of the broader context of this, because I would say you cannot have democracy in the system as a whole without having small d democracy at the base of that system, in community, in enterprises, in the economy. And one of the big things that we're suffering from at the moment is a crisis of democracy all around the world, here in the United States in particular, but we're not alone. This is happening in country after country. And if you dig into that, I would argue the relationship between the economy and democracy is part of what has been going badly, badly wrong. Jacob gave us the cliched etymology of demos. Well, here's some more cliched etymology. Oikonomos, keeper of the household. This is where economics comes from. This is what the economy is supposed to be about. The economy in relationship to society, serving community, serving families, serving needs in balance with the natural world. And that is totally out of whack at the moment. And that is part of what at root, I would argue, and many others are arguing this, and I think the data shows it, and the opinion polls show that people are well aware of this, something is going profoundly wrong with the economy. And part of what that is that work no longer pays anymore. But part of it is that the way that the economy is structured means that all the benefits are flowing to the owners of assets, right? This is an asset economy, a capital gains economy. You don't get rich by working hard. You get rich by owning assets. And so the game is about the acquisition of those assets and the increase of the value of those assets over time. What co-ops offer are a means by which we can begin to democratize the ownership of assets at the base of the economy and also begin to build democratic citizens in the workplace and in the community in service of trying to reestablish, which I fear is something we're going to have to be doing in the future, democracy in the system as a whole. You know, it's odd, right? Politically, we have a lot of assumptions about democracy, about everybody having an equal say and a chance to have their vote count, etc. We know all the shortcomings of that, but that isn't how we think about the economy. The economy is an autocracy, an aristocracy, right? Where we are told what to do by bosses who rule over us like monarchs and sometimes like tyrants, right? And what cooperative organization, which frankly is as old as the species itself, allows us to get at is a new way of beginning to organize the economic activity that we all need, the keeping of the household, food, clothing, housing, all the other essentials of life, and to do it collectively and together in ownership forms that allow us broadly to own the economy, because it's becoming very clear that you can't have an economic plutocracy and a political democracy. One or the other is going to triumph. One is going to consume the other. At the moment, we know which way that's going. Economic plutocracy is consuming our political democracy. We've got to flip that around. We've got to make sure that we suffuse democracy into the economy. Cooperatives are an enormously important part of how we go about doing that. They're not the only way. There's land trust, there's public ownership, there's a whole slew of other ways in which we go about organizing the ownership and control of assets and of the economy. But cooperatives are very important. And 1 in 3 Americans is in a co-op of one way, shape, or form, right? Agricultural co-ops, credit unions, which are really one member, one vote, democratic banks. So we're actually not punching with the weight that we need to as a sector in terms of self-consciousness about what it means to embody the cooperative principle in the economy and how that then relates to community and to democracy more widely. So thanks, I'll stop there.
I think they did a great job. Do I still need to go? I don't know. But I think that they really summed it up perfectly in kind of the state that we're living in as a country right now. Individualism is really a priority for us as a society. And I think the co-op really does serve as a space where we can be a direct contrast to that. And I think with our work as a board, as members of the board of the North Flint Food Market, which will be opening November 12th, very exciting, very exciting. But I think with what we've been doing on the board and what we're excited to continue doing is involving the staff in the business operations of this. Of course, the staff is involved in the business operations of the store, but the staff also is a part of the community. I think the opportunity that the North Flint Food Market really does try to take advantage of is that its staff does live in North Flint. A lot of the staff lives in surrounding areas of Flint. Therefore, they really do prioritize the mission of the store to want to not only expand access to healthy foods in North Flint, but to bring job opportunities for the people living here so that we can, as my colleague here, my panelist here was saying, infuse democracy into this economy that we're trying to continue. And I do think North Flint Food Market is on its way to doing so. It's one of the, to Jacob's question, it is one of the advantages of the food co-op. In terms of the difficulties, that individualism is it pushes at our door every day, right? We really are worried about our own families, but what happens when we can step outside of ourselves and want to work together is really where our community outreach, we really try to promote that message every day in our advocacy.
This might be dangerous though. First of all, I'm a former educator, I'm a minister, and I speak for a living. So are you sure you want to put this mic in my mouth?
I am so sharp.
I just first, before I answer this, I want to say thank you, Jacob, for allowing us to be here. So this is my home. I spend a lot of time in this building. As you can tell, go blue! I am a Wolverine through and through. But anyhow, to answer the question of advantages, I just want to go back and give a little historical context for North-Flint Food Market. We are a co-op, but it started out of the fact that we could sit, as Jacob said earlier, for the past 20 years, we've seen a lot of things happen in the city of Flint. We could sit as a community and we could talk about it, or as my uncle, who was one of my role models, he said we could be about it. And so we decided as a group to be about it. North Flint Food Market started out of the need for North Flint Reinvestment Corporation to do something. It started with a small group of people that decided we were going to look at the advantages of having a cooperative grocery store food market. Instead of thinking about how can I just start, and I'm a business owner, so I'm definitely not talking about entrepreneurs. I've been a serial entrepreneur for the past 30 years. So not talking about that in that sense, a negative sense, but it is great when we can do a collaboration, when we can do a cooperative. And so that's what we're doing at North Flint Food Market. It stems to answer the how can we solve the problem and what can we do in the north side of Flint. So the advantage that we have is we got people to come together. We have almost 1,000 member owners. I did pause for a clap. We have almost 1,000 member owners. And again, the impact is to help. We started our store on the principles and not just theory. So we believe in the Nguza Saba principles. Ujama, cooperative economics. This is something that we live. And so the advantage that we have is that we have the ability to be able to change our community within our own power. So that goes back to democracy, but it also goes back to changing ideologies into actual action work. Unfortunately, one of the advantages is that you have to be able to, one of the disadvantages is you have to have the monetary wherewithal to be able to do some of that. But at the same time, we have been able to do a really great job with the cooperative because we are right in the range. Most cooperative grocery stores take anywhere from 8 to 14 years to come into fruition. We're in year number 10 and we open our doors next week. We have fully shelved shelves. And again, it's not about us. It's not about an entity. As Taylor just said, we sit on the board. As the board president, I love being able to see this is not just about me, but we are changing our community and we're making sure that we're a part of that. So an advantage of the cooperative also is the fact that the sustainability can be there as well because we are keeping the community dollar inside of the community. We've hired almost 40 staff members and literally we can keep the money. As Taylor said, they reside within the community. And again, we're able to do that. We own the land and we own our vision. So some of our advantages, thank you. Some of our advantages is being able to change what has happened in the north side of Flint. And I'll get into it more later, but that one is just the biggest one. We'll come back to that one. But for the sake of time, The advantage is it's by the people, for the people, democracy. There's many different principles of cooperatives, and the one that I love the best, being a former educator, being a former teacher and principal, is education is a part of it. And so one of the advantages that we have with even being a cooperative is we don't just have to practice it, we actually can educate other people around us, and especially those in our community.
Thank you so much. I want to ask a follow-up question to all of you. What do you think are the most prevalent, untrue stereotypes, myths, misunderstandings of co-ops? Because you hear people say, well, how does it work if there's no boss? Don't you need some sort of hierarchy? Isn't this, contrary to, the founding principles of the United States? So go from a local. Excuse me?
So people don't say that.
Oh, really? You haven't heard anyone say, well, isn't this socialism? Isn't this, something? Well, then correct me then, please. From both a local sort of micro perspective, but also from a larger perspective, what do you think are some of the greatest stereotypes, untrue assumptions about co-ops?
Yeah, I mostly meant that I don't hear people going back to the founding of the United States as a moment of critiquing any modern political economic forms, whether they're cooperatives or other things. But socialism, which came century or two later, certainly does come up and is a common critique. I think the first one that you said is the most common misconception. And I think that some of that is of our own making, certainly for worker co-ops, the idea that many people in the last 30 years who've been involved in worker co-ops take pride in having some sort of distributed management. And then there's something that's like so novel and voyeuristic about that. So that's the story that always comes to the journalists and the documentary filmmakers and the graduate students. It's always about like, there's no boss. And the bumper stickers, like, there's no boss. And actually, there's no owner, there's no single owner is really what's going on. And I actually am doing a lot of work with our members to sort of guide us into taking pride that we're all bosses. Like that's the point. And then also doing a lot of myth busting around the fact that all successful co-ops need to address management in some way, whether it's that it's equitable or whether there's a coordinating committee or whether it's rotating roles. There's all different numbers. So I think the biggest misconception is that, first of all, that there's one approach to what management looks like. The only thing that's structured in a cooperative is the ownership, right? And not even the governance. Even that can shift. So for very small firms, they might all be on the board, and that's fine and efficient. It makes sense when you're 15 people or fewer, which is about the typical size of a worker co-op in this country. If you line up all of the co-ops, the average size is maybe closer to 50 or 60, which is still quite small. But then you're averaging in the firms that have 300 or 2,000 workers in them, and those exist also. But I think remembering that on the ownership side, governance, having a board of directors that's either elected or appointed, or everyone takes turns and rotates through, but you need a smaller group of people, and it is a group of people. It is not one person who is, the supreme judge of anything, to come together and, first of all, hold fiscal responsibility. They're responsible for the compliance of the whole organization with tax policy, with labor law, with all the other things, and then holding the whole organization accountable to its own founding principles, mission, policies that they pass, mandates from the general membership. But I think on the management side is where it gets really interesting. I myth bust all the time by just sharing the number of members that we have that have a general manager, or a president, or an executive director, or somebody who has a different kind of role. There's also a misconception that everyone's paid the same. No, we do a census every 2 years because the government doesn't do it for us. So we have the data set, and we collect economic data from all the workplaces, and maybe it's less frequently, we gather data on all the individual workers as well, about the economic impact on their lives and in their families and on their health and all those other things. And what we found is that overall, in the U.S., the wages are usually not more than 3 times the highest earning person and the lowest earning person in the firm. And that's in contrast to a U.S. average of, or discrepancy in traditional corporations where it's about a 300 or 400 to 1 wage disparity. So what does Jeff Bezos versus a janitor in Amazon or delivery worker make? So those things are, but that's different than it being that everyone has the same job, everyone makes the same wage. Sometimes you need people who have specialized skills. If you might have a co-op of people who are circus performers, and there really are co-ops that do that, but you're still going to need to have a bookkeeper or a social media person who does not know how to do aerials and trapeze, right? So like there are different roles. You might have someone who does makeup or something else. Those are different kinds of roles, even if they're all members of the cooperative.
So there are all manner of objections to these particular forms of ownership and cooperation. A lot of them are basically just operating at the level of prejudice. We hear that these are some sort of hippie non-businesses, really, that there are inefficiencies, that they're not able to scale, that they're anti-entrepreneurial, that they're anti-innovation. We have some economists with us in the room today, God forgive them. Neoclassical economics. I've read papers that say, cooperatives are destined to underinvest. Neoclassical economics being what it is. I've also read papers that say that cooperatives are destined to overinvest, right? The point is, though, that if you go to any sector of any economy almost anywhere in the world, you'll find a cooperative business form that has been adapted and is appropriate in that sector. This is one of those instances where the practice is way ahead of the theory. We know that it works in practice. Right. Now we just need to work with our economist friends to make it work in theory.
Knockdown, drag out, come to the later economic session to see the response.
I would say I unfortunately do agree that the practice itself does work. When you have people who are come together with the goal, shared goal to make the co-op work, all the rest of it works itself out through that. We are all there as a board to make sure that all of the members, when they come to our monthly meetings, feel heard and their voices feel heard in order to be implemented in the way that the store does operate. The staff also as well coming to our monthly meetings and making sure that we're all working together in collaboration is really a focal point of the board to make sure that all these different voices, perspectives come together, and it ensures that the co-op is going in the way that all the people who have invested their time and energy into it wish it to. And that's really what the co-op model is all about.
And the only thing that I would add goes back to, again, the education piece. So one of the 7 principles of co-ops is being able to have that education piece in there. I think a lot of society still doesn't understand it. Some people are okay with having the status quo, but not understanding the power that comes with it and everything. And so for us, we don't have people that have said that to us. We just have a lot of people that don't understand the principles and the practical part of why we're doing what we're doing and how we're doing it, that they literally have a piece of the pie, even though some of them are still members.
Excellent. Okay, thanks. Let me ask this question. How do you think that government, local government, even national government, and probably more important for communities like ours, institutions and communities can help support co-ops? So yeah.
I think you're first on this one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this one is for me, and I think at this point,
It's for everyone, but
let me tell you a little story. It was mentioned in the welcoming remarks that my organization, the Democracy Collaboratives, has been doing some work in Cleveland, Ohio, which is really where we got started on the model of economic development that we call community wealth building. I think it was Taylor that talked about economic multipliers, about keeping money locally. The purpose of community wealth building is to do exactly that in the face of what is not an accident, but is actually an economy that's driven by extraction, by big corporations and other economic actors sucking money out of our communities and distributing it upwards. So community wealth building was developed in Cleveland in response to a lot of the problems that they've been experiencing there. And I know that you here in Flint have experienced a lot of them, being neighbors. By the way, I'm British and Irish. I believe there may be some football rivalry between Michigan and Ohio that I maybe don't know about. So if I put a foot wrong, please forgive me. But
This is a welcoming space.
so we were invited to talk to the city of Cleveland and the Cleveland Foundation, which was their local philanthropy, because they've been trying almost everything they could think of to address what was a pretty familiar economic picture, I think, to many of you here. This is disinvestment, deindustrialization, the departure of the big Fortune 500 companies that had been anchoring that economy for a long period, the flight of population, both white flight to the suburbs, but overall depopulation. I think Cleveland lost something like 40% of its population since the 1950s. And those that remain behind, many of them black communities, many of them below the federal poverty line. And yet, when we started looking at what existed in Cleveland in this sort of landscape of ruin, of cracked pavements, if you like, we noticed that actually there was still tremendous wealth located there. It wasn't just the activity of the city of Cleveland itself and the public spending that it was engaged in. There were also very big, what we call anchor institutions, place-based economic entities that are tied there and aren't going to up and leave like big corporations often will do. So one good example in Cleveland is the Cleveland Clinic, one of the top research and medical hospitals in the country. People not just from across the United States, but around the world go to the Cleveland Clinic, in particular for heart surgery. They need to keep attracting the best doctors, the best researchers, etc. And yet all around them is decay and the community falling apart. At the same time, the Cleveland Clinic, if you've been to Cleveland, block after block after block, an enormous economic engine and presence. And if you lift the lid on what they were doing, enormous amounts of expenditure each year in goods and services that were needed. Add in university hospitals, add in Case Western Reserve University, Cleveland State, add in the city of Cleveland, add in cultural institutions, sports teams, etc. And actually, you're pretty quickly getting to something that looks like about a third of any given local economy. So what we said to them was, why don't you look at how you're spending your money? And why don't you repurpose this to actually build cooperatives that would serve the needs of these anchor institutions, give them guaranteed tenders and access to economic support over time so that they could plan. What if we analyzed your needs and came up with some businesses that could be created in response to those? And that was the birth of the Evergreen Cooperatives. And the particular co-op I want to just spend a minute on talking about is the Evergreen Cooperative Laundry. Right? If you're a hospital, you have a lot of needs for laundry, sheets, swabs, etc., etc. It turns out the big multinational corporation, I don't think I should name them publicly, but they were missing all their targets for laundry for the Cleveland Clinic, to the point where the Cleveland Clinic was canceling surgeries because they didn't have clean sheets. Crazy, right? So we set up initially a small pilot laundry that took a subcontract and began to serve Cleveland Clinic, but also other specialist needs around the area. The largest actually industrial scale green laundry in the Midwest, even at that point. And over time, we got them to the point where they were efficient enough and effective enough that they were able to outbid the large multinational corporation and get the entirety of the contract from the Cleveland Clinic. What this meant was that all the former workers for that big multinational company were rehired. They were put on a living wage. They were put on fast track to employee ownership in the company so that they could take ownership stakes. And they had access to a number of programs that the city began to put around this effort in terms of assistance buying housing. Most of the workers at the Evergreen Cooperative Laundry are returning citizens from the criminal justice system, over 60%, 80% of them black workers, right? Think about the household income of $18,000, and then think about the living wage, and then think about the dividend that once these companies reached profitability, the workers start to get $10,000 in some instances. That is the beginnings of life-changing amounts of money. We're now seeing the workers able to buy houses. Some of them have even bought a second house and are actually getting into to the American dream of the old way of building wealth, etc. So this example, I think, is something that we can do in lots of other ways, in lots of other sectors, in lots of combinations of local government, anchor institutions, community needs, identifying gaps in the chain or places where local businesses aren't providing that, and cutting out the extraction by the big multinationals. The only thing that disappeared when the contract went from the big multinational to Evergreen Cooperative Laundry was the dividend to absentee shareholders, and many of them are the super rich, and much of their wealth goes into offshore tax havens and all of the like. So what we're actually doing now with the Evergreen cooperatives, which are linked together, they're owned by their workers, but there's a golden share that's held by the community that allows us to determine when it makes sense to sell a business or to expand a business, or et cetera, et cetera. The only thing that disappeared in the change of that contract was that extraction. And so instead what we're building is a recirculatory economy of community wealth, and we've got some good examples of that happening here in Flint already.
Others?
You just illustrated the main point I was going to make, which is when I think about the role that institutions and governments can play, I think about, I just finished watching The Pit, which is, for those of you who've seen like ER from the 90s, and thinking about just the first principle for doctors, physicians, nurses, is just to first do no harm. And so when we start the question of, well, what can we do? Co-ops sound great. What can we do to help? I think it's like we're jumping already to like 3 stages down. The first thing is to back up and assess like what is the economy we're actively purporting and supporting and subsidizing, especially local governments. All kinds of subsidies for corporations that are extractive, where all of our wealth from the community, from not just taxpayers, but like workers, is being siphoned off. The impact on our public health, again, I don't know why public health is like the theme that keeps coming up for me today. So I think that the first principle, what you could do to promote cooperatives and a cooperative economy, community wealth building, is to back up to first principles of not doing harm. Where are we currently investing our funds, whether it's through pension funds or like, where is that money going? And if it's going toward the same banks that are poisoning the air with incinerators and everything else. So really like doing an assessment of that first, then starting to think about intermediary institutions, community development financial institutions. We're part of a lot of coalitions advocating for public banking, for example, so that there can be a place for deposit holders to invest. I mean, the problem with credit unions is that we're overregulated, right? Which is intentional by the bank lobby. And so the mission's all there, the democratic structure's all there, but there's only so much you can do, even as businesses, to get real financing from a credit union. You can get a car loan, you can get a house loan maybe, but they're very, very limited. So what does it look like to be able to say, okay, all of the teachers' unions can deposit their funds, public people can deposit their, universities can deposit things into a public bank. That then can be a mission-driven organization that is responsible for community development at scale. You can talk about public transportation. We can talk about business community incubators. I do think that there's things that are that would make a difference that folks who are setting up new cooperative businesses struggle with, that are an upfront cost. So land, for example, we have a lot of businesses in the food industry in our membership. The cost of renting or leasing agricultural land, of which there's less and less available in this country, it's incredibly expensive. It's all been bought up by private equity, right? So what are those roles? Where else can we step in to push back against the incursion of private equity? Speaking of leveling the playing field, I mean, it's like so tilted. If you could do anything to leveling it would be a dream. That's beyond reach of anything we could do. But can we begin to make things even possible for small and local businesses? And I think that does involve things like I don't know if you're familiar with community benefits agreements, CBAs, but being able to write into some sort of a contract that anytime you're permitting the development of a new high-rise hotel or the expansion of a highway or a stadium or anything, that there's a set of provisions there about the procurement. Okay, you're going to build a stadium. Well, who are the vendors going to be? Is it just Starbucks all over again? Is it just Dunkin' Donuts? Like, why can't it be local? I don't know if any of you, I live in Philadelphia. I don't know if any of you have flown through the Philadelphia airport in the last couple of years, but I've noticed in the last couple of years, through some incredible work that I was not involved in, almost all of the businesses in the airport are places that they're just independent restaurants. They're independent bars. They're independent places to get ice cream and coffee, local roasters, and they have branches in our airport. That's the kind of thing that you can do when you wrest control of governance of local institutions. That's just as true inside of a university as it is for an airport, as it is for a city, right? So really thinking about procurement and where those dollars go and what those asks are. If there are claims around development about creating jobs, well, what kind of jobs? Are they union jobs? If they're union jobs, are they a one-off? Is it just a gig that you have a construction thing and that's considered a win and you go away? Like, what about the kind of stories that Joe was just illustrating about, like, really thinking about families and communities, really thinking about their livelihoods and the ability to depend on jobs and income that have all the benefits we're talking about with cooperatives. I think all of those things need to be taken into consideration. And sure, if you can set up community infrastructure for things like warehouses, community incubator kitchens, access to land, anything else that's going to be helpful, small business services, then sure, those things can be helpful as well.
Thanks.
I'm gonna use my notes on this one so I don't get on a rabbit hole in this one. But I'm sitting here looking at the subtitle here, Cracks in the Pavement, but the subtitle, Envisioning Democratic Futures in Flint and Beyond. What government can do is help us envision that democratic future for Flint. Government institutions can either be bridges, and they can help us to get over there, or they can be barriers. And I will speak for the north side of Flint. That's where our co-op is located. And it's located there intentionally because we have historically experienced a lot of issues on the north side of Flint for decades and beyond, from redlining to all types of things that have happened. And so for us, being a Black-led co-op, government has to support and help and to be one of those bridges. One of the things that we have constantly sought is funding from multiple government sources, but especially here in the city of Flint. And unfortunately, that has been a barrier for us. So one of the things that they could help with is making sure that that funding is there. Understanding, again, the collaborative model. And again, I'm gonna go back to the Ngozi Saba principles, Jason, that's the core of who we are. And so Ujima means we're gonna work with the community. And if we really mean we're gonna work with the community and not for the community, then we need the government to be able to, all municipalities, but especially our local government, to understand that and see that. For us, our drive is so strong because, again, on the north side of Flint, before the North Flint food market was redeveloped, because we bought a pre-existing building and then expanded out, the Hamilton Clinic was the only major thing that happened on that side of town, outside of some residential things happening. And so we need economic, not disparities, but we need equal leverage and to be able to have a voice and, again, to even mean something. And this is no shock to anybody, but we spend a lot of dollars in this area down here. And we want to make sure that it's equitable. And so if we're going to really see the change that we need to see in our, not just in Flint, but just in our country, we have to stop the economic disparities. And then last thing that I would like to add to that is, again, just them being real partners and not, sometimes when elections happen, we get all of these promises and then the promises don't come true. We really need that to happen. And again, listen to us to define what success looks like for us. And so for us, again, starting the North-Flint Food Market, it was for the community to be able to start back getting the things that they needed to have in that side of the town. But again, the biggest thing that government can do for us is listen and be that voice of reason when we need that voice of reason, and put the money where the mouth is.
Sister Jackson, I think, put it perfectly in that local government, local institutions can be bridges or barriers. I think that she described what it looks like in a barrier sense. In a bridges sense, community partners have facilitated the growth of North-Flint Food Market for the past 10 years. And for example, the Ruth Mott Foundation has recently come aboard as collaborative partners. And because of them, we were able to implement phase 1 of our pre-opening store plan. This is just an example out of many. We were able to get on board with the National Co-op Grocers organization, who was able to facilitate the growth of bringing on our 40+ staff members based here in the city, also stocking our first fill of inventory. These partnerships are what keep co-ops going and moving in a prosperous way. And the thing about the local institutions who have came to the table with the co-op and have contributed to its prosperity have been exactly as Sister Jackson put it, willing to be partners, willing to be in genuine collaboration with the mission and the vision of the store. And I think that that partnership is really valuable.
Please.
Yeah, I was going to add just one more thing that slipped my mind, even though it's the main work that we do in partnering with institutions and with local governments and cities, which is we've developed a whole toolkit for building out a cooperative ecosystem. So there's different elements to it, and it kind of is the structure that everything that we've just heard that it kind of hangs on. So the idea is really developing a healthy and hospitable environment for these business forms to flourish, and it involves organizing things like finance, capital, research, partnerships with research institutions, technical assistance, because obviously this does get very technical, like what does it look like to advise maybe a retiring business owner who's interested in selling the business to the employees, the workers, the valuation of the business, all the things involved in business development, and a healthy policy environment as well. So there's toolkits that we have about this. We incubated an organization called the Democracy at Work Institute, which is our nonprofit sister organization that's a think and do tank similar to Democracy Collaborative as another think and do tank. And so there's lots of resources that are out there if you are interested in taking on that work and developing a cooperative ecosystem, which I think is part of the sort of promise of conversations that we're going to be having today.
Thanks. I want to ask, and I haven't really written this the exact way I'm going to ask it, but I'm inspired by a lot of the things that people have been saying to me. How might co-ops specifically address the needs of under-resourced communities? We talked about this a little, but I want to kind of really focus on that. But also, how do you think, or might it be that under-resourced communities actually might be particularly fruitful environments and spaces to start these types of businesses? Joe talked about, and all of you talked about, really, the first part of oftentimes founding a co-op or trying to instigate sort of a ecosystem of democracy is looking at the resources that communities have. And some of those resources, especially communities like ours, are often not acknowledged by the powers that be. So if you could just talk about specifically co-ops and under-resourced communities, how they can help, co-ops can help the communities, but how those communities
really be excellent places to start them.
Well, I understand the premise. I have stopped using the language of under-resourced communities because I think it sort of deletes the menacing actor behind the scenes, which is like, we're not under-resourced. There's active extraction, dispossession, and theft that's happening, whether that's wage theft, whether that's expropriation of land, right? Wealth comes from somewhere. If it ends up in the pocketbooks of Amazon, like that's from a reason. It comes out, or Walmart, or anyone else, it comes from our community. So the resources are here. It's more about how do we build the capacity to retain more of it. We know that cooperatives, okay, this is for the economists, that cooperative dollars multiply 3x when they stay in the community, right? So if there's a co-op institution in the community versus Home Depot, Amazon, whatever, that the dollars that are spent there, they multiply through the community, right? It goes to the hairstylist and the babysitter and the teacher and the farmer's market, like all of those things actually stay in the community. So I think, first of all, recognizing that when we see a community that has the symptoms of being under-resourced, it's a reminder that it's a site of there being active theft and dispossession happening. And then I grow curious about, well, let's map out what led to that in this particular community. And not just historically, although that has a lot to do with the conditions, but also what's happening right now to perpetuate those conditions happening. And then also thinking about what are the things that we can do for ourselves. It's not going to be solving and creating an entire economy overnight, but I do think this question of beginning to practice this muscle of having agency over our economic lives. So that's a lot of what we're talking about is not just democracy in jury duty and voting and the judicial system, but to have economic democracy as a component that we can expect. And that becomes, and we started talking about this at the beginning, an ingredient for reprogramming civil society to expect democracy in our political lives when we're experiencing and gaining skills for practicing democracy in our economic lives, right? So there are a lot of things. I think co-ops are one, but there's many examples of mutual aid projects and formations that are meeting people's direct needs. I think the most useful cooperatives are doing that in different ways, which does mean it's not always something that's retail or something that you're going to see. Like a lot of very successful cooperatives are doing things that are in logistics or that are really behind the scenes, or that might be digital, whether that's bookkeeping or web development or something related to design. Figuring out like what skills do we have within a particular community. We do a lot of accelerators and business courses around, doing a market study or doing cohorting where you're working with whether it's young people or returning citizens. We do a ton of co-op development in immigrant communities, immigrant workers. So what are your skills? And if you don't have a lot of financing, or if you're not interested or eligible for taking out debt in order to get your business started, you probably could just start mowing people's lawns or cleaning people's homes with very little upfront capital cost. So there are things like that, and really just remembering that ultimately many cooperatives are mutual aid projects that happen to benefit the people working there, but also the rest of the community experiencing those services. And then cooperatives lean on each other. That's one of the basic principles of being a co-op. It's the sixth cooperative principle. And so I know that when I was involved in a food co-op, which was also part of National Co-op Grocers at a certain point, we were looking to expand to a larger space, which was just going to be helpful for our business model, but also we were bursting out at the seams from a very small space. And we were able to receive loans from a local worker co-op bike shop, a local housing co-op, land trust. There was a whole community of other organizations that were able to lean in. And so we were able to turn our community from something that looked like it was under-resourced. And it doesn't happen overnight, but over the course of 10 or 12 years, suddenly it's a vibrant place that New Yorkers want to gentrify and move to Philadelphia. So that happens too.
So Jason, I think your particular question about whether in some senses the Rust Belt is prefigurative and is an important place to look for solutions is really on point, right? You don't need me to tell you here in Flint that nobody is coming to save you, right? No one has come to save you for 50 years, right? And unfortunately, just to get a little dark for a moment, the experience of the Rust Belt and of deindustrialization in America, I think, is prefigurative of what's going to happen on the current course that we're on with AI, with robotics, with automation, with all the disruptions that are coming down and that are about to hit. And not only is nobody coming to save us collectively, but it's actually worse than that. I'm based out of Washington, D.C., and at the moment, we're in the looting and pillaging phase, right, of American capitalism. This is really about theft, upwards redistribution at an extraordinary scale. And so on the one hand, there are spaces like the Midwest where industry once hummed that have been abandoned, disinvested, disadvantaged, and stolen from. On the other hand, even the hot marketplaces in this system are places where gentrification are occurring, where it's no longer livable, where affordability is becoming the political issue for more and more people. We just saw this with the election in New York. And so I think the conditions here and the experience of knowing that really you have to operate with what you've got because nobody is coming in to save you is the right starting point for how we think about building and turning around this economy as a whole. And if you put on the lenses of cooperative economic development, of community wealth building, of these different ways of seeing things, and look around you, suddenly new patterns, new possibilities start to emerge, right? So for us, we've got our own schema, but there are parallel schemas that others are working with at DAWI and elsewhere. But for us in community wealth building, there's 5 core pillars of a local economy to look at. There's procurement, which we've been talking about. There's also land and housing assets and how we make use of that. There's local finance and the way in which investment flows and whether there are institutions that can be created and relationships that can get flows of local finance just in the same way that we're trying to create multipliers with demand and with local expenditure and so on. There's also fair work, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about this and about the agenda on labor rights in the future. But there's an opportunity through the contracts that local government, the anchor institutions like hospitals and universities and others put in place to enshrine and advance fair working conditions and to drive an agenda that allies labor to those institutions in trying to do things that remake the local economy. And last and most importantly for us is the pillar of democratic enterprise. And at the heart of that is co-ops, but it's not just co-ops, right? We see it as a spectrum of economic models, right? Where all the way at the least democratic end of the spectrum, you've got absentee multinational corporations and extraction. It's better if you move to local businesses, right? You do at least get some of those multipliers, but then it gets even better when you move into social enterprises or benefit corporations. Then you can start looking at land trusts, worker and consumer cooperatives, and then all the way at the end is municipal enterprise and the public actually owning things outright for themselves. And I think this is a place where, frankly, there's not going to be any other alternative but to look around at the resources that already exist. And we need to figure out how we start to knit them together. And you can start to do this on Monday morning, right? You don't have to wait for anyone to come to save you. And there's a lot of these institutions, including cooperatives, that on and figure out what is the right mix, what is the right balance, what are the opportunities that we can do. And it's a real pleasure to be with some people that are actually doing that. So let them talk.
I would say on the perspective of the outreach sides of things, the thing that I love most about serving this community in Flint is that you can see what it looks like from the people who live around the store, the excitement that it brings. One of for memory is our last Juneteenth celebration we were able to have at the store, and we did it in collaboration with the traditional Juneteenth celebration. And just at this one event alone, over 20 local businesses were able to come into the North Flint Food Market parking lot, set up shop, set up tents, and sell their local goods to the community. there was music and there was food, and we got to give tours of the facility for the first time to the elders who lived in the surrounding neighborhoods. And that touched me personally, and is the reason I really was excited to stay on the board, is because you could genuinely see what something like this can do to the morale of the community. The business parts of things are extremely important. I'm not trying to say that. Of course, that is the most important. You know, you want to make money. But genuinely just having something that the community can be proud of is something that I truly believe is valuable and was beautiful to see.
So I'm going to first start off by challenging the word under-resourced, because resources come in so many different facets. And human capital is one of the best things that we can leverage. And so when we look at disadvantaged communities, or communities, again, we'll talk about North Flint side, because that's where our co-op is. There's disadvantages there, but the human capital there is amazing. Again, one of our Ngozi Sabo principles is Kuumba, which means creativity. When we have been able, as Taylor just got there saying, try to help level the playing field, then we've been able to see some resources come out that were never there. But as far as Flint, I don't believe that Flint is like totally under-resourced. Some communities might be under-resourced. We had $300 million dollars come in for the water crisis. You know, challenge always is, where does that money go? And has it gone to the most needed places to get the most needed impact? Because when we pour into our people, so again, for everybody to know, I'm a former elementary teacher, former elementary principal. So the people are always going to be my first thing. When we pour into the people, we will get the things that we need in society if we help leverage that. So I just wanted to bring that out first. And then I wanted to just add, again, when I say not funded or, you know, under-resourced here, we have a lot of big, for Flint to be the size that it is, you know, when we look at some other major cities, we have the University of Michigan, Flint. We have Michigan State, unfortunately, she's a state person over here. We have Michigan State Extension. We have the Crim Foundation, Mott Foundation, CS Mott Foundation, and Roof Mott Foundation. We got United Way, Genesee County Land Bank, Greater Foundation. Like we have, and if you look at the annual reports, you will see there's a lot of funding that comes through those vehicles. And so again, the challenge is, how do we make sure that we are putting that where it's going to be most impacted? And if we pour into, and this is what the whole purpose of cooperatives is that we give communities an opportunity to have sovereignty and not just survival. And so when we continue to do that, we will continue to see the gains that we want to see. So I kind of challenge that word a little bit. That's hard for me because as an educator, it's like, you listen. I'm not that way anymore after, I'm not gonna tell you my age, but anyways, after so many years of living on this earth, I kind of challenge stuff now. And so I would just say redefining what we're saying when we say, you know, use that word resource, because people are resources. And we put those funding, hint, funders that are out there, when we put those funding sources into people, that they then can turn them into creative ways to do some amazing things. I heard somebody talk about incubators, and you know, we have the ability to be able to do anything. Flint is just what its name is. We're strong. We're a rock. You know, and so we can come back from anything if we make sure that the resources are not that are not diverted, but put in the proper places where they need to be to get the most impact that it needs to have. And again, that starts with the community.
Thank you, thank you. Let me ask one last question. I'm going to call an audible too. We're supposed to go till 11:15, and if we have time, I'd like to take some questions. So I mean, feel free to answer, you know, as long as you want, or feel free to, you know, try to think about questions afterwards. But my final question, it does sort of address the issue of resources in communities. And, you know, we're in a university right now, so I just wanted to, and since, you know, we have people coming from think do tanks, people who are doing, I mean, what do you think that universities could do to help particular co-ops, help, you know, keep wealth in the community, help to fight against the extraction that Esteban talked about? I mean, what could we do here? That's my final question.
Well, the shortest answer is to dig into some of those resources. I mean, we've developed the broader we. There's a paper trail of toolkits for what it looks like for universities to take that seriously. Like there is a blueprint for doing that, and then there's a whole universe of organizations who are happy to partner or consult on how to tailor that and adapt that for your specific context. The more exciting thing that I would say, this is just my own, I think one of the coolest things I've seen at a university related to this whole conversation is at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. They have a thing called the Center for Student Businesses. It came out of a program that they started in the 70s. They're not the only one, it just was the largest and most successful because they continued to resource it. And so they really were experimenting with this idea of co-curricular learning. So the idea that, yes, you've got your classes, and obviously you could teach classes about cooperatives. I mean, and there's curriculum for that too. I have friends who teach about co-op. So if you're interested in that, we can network, we can get you those things too. That's a very easy thing you could do as well. But they set up this co-curricular learning thing so that outside of the classroom, students were involved in, it was like maybe a dozen different student-run businesses that are right there in their student union building. And so there's a student market, there's a cafe, which is a separate business. There's another business that does hot foods. There's another business that does sandwiches, a business that does copy shop things, Kinko's kind of things. One that sells tickets for events, right? And then each of the businesses has delegates that they send to the Center for Student Businesses. And so they co-govern under the mentorship of, there's like a bookkeeper who's assigned, who's just paid, it's a grown-up woman who does this, and who mentors the students who have to do their own bookkeeping, right? So it's almost like having homework. They have to, their sales reports and their receipts and everything, and then they get the support, almost like how I have a tax guy. It doesn't mean I'm not paying attention to all the finance, but I have to like get it all organized, and then it gets vetted by the tax guy. So they have all of that. They have a general manager, a bookkeeper. There's like 2 or 3 different staff people in that office, and then a bunch of students who work for the Center for Student Businesses, organizing all of that. When I tell you the entrepreneurs that have come out of that program, the things that they've gone on to do in their lives as organizers, as small business owners, as cooperative organizers, it's pretty phenomenal. And then it is an idea of, again, recirculating that wealth within the campus community while inspiring students with things that they need ultimately. I mean, do you need that money to go to Starbucks or whatever? Like, so that is my passion would be seeing more universities take on those opportunities again. And then it could be work study, whatever it is, but it's an opportunity for the students themselves to have some extra income and employment. And who knows what that leads to after they graduate.
Yeah, I think Esteban said most of it already, just a couple of additional points. I mean, one thing to say is I think it's extremely encouraging that this conversation is happening, and also that we have Chancellor Alexander present. I think this might be the start of a slow ambush in some ways. But basically, I think the obvious thing for the university to think about is to really embrace what we at TDC and others are calling the anchor mission. Right? The purposing of the institution and its economic decision making and its economic footprint in the community to do a lot of the things that we've been talking about already today. But I also agree with Esteban that in some ways the even more interesting and exciting stuff, because a lot of that stuff is it's well understood now. You basically just have to make the decision and do the hard work, and culture takes a lot to change on procurement over time, and I'm not trying to minimize that, but basically you need a political decision that you're going to do that and then set about doing it. And there's a lot of things, toolkits, organizations, institutional support that can be provided to help universities like this one along their journey. But the more interesting place, I think, is the ideas space, and is the link to the core purpose of learning of this institution and the role that it should be playing in the community. I think too much of American education has been squeezed into a very instrumental relationship to work and to skills. And I understand we've been talking about all the patterns in the economy, but let's look at the title, Cracks in the Pavement, right? There are cracks in the pavement already, but what does that mean? Do we, as one of the introductory speakers said, are we trying to fill those cracks, or are we actually trying to do something a bit more radical? Are we trying to tear up those paving stones and see what's beneath it? It was, I think, the Situationist International in the 60s who talked about sous les paves, la plage, beneath the paving stones, the beach. What's the beach of actual life that's worth living in this community, and how do we envisage it, and how do we put the idea and the intellectual firepower of these institutions to work on the needs of their communities? I think then you get those two things going, the anchor mission and the role of the university in looking forward to a better community and working with the community to propagate that. I think you would have something very, very exciting happening.
I love this question. Again, as an educator, my answer is going to be educate first and foremost. But also, I think universities can make sure that they have the collaborations and partnerships with people in the community. That right there is so powerful that, again, universities can be seen as the ally and the one that helps, offering different types of things. Again, doing a lot of research. Sometimes when people are boots on the ground, they don't have the wherewithal sometimes to do all of that, but having those collaborations with departments at the university so that they can get those things, that would be really helpful. Again, students being able to see hands-on what these things look like and not just in theory. For me, as being an educator, I had to go out and I had to take courses and real hands-on. So I had to go do a math methods class, and I had to go we had to go in the schools and do. And so being able to have that makes it so real and realistic. Business development is very, very key. It can happen at the business level. Additional universities, they have the opportunity to patronize, local co-ops, local worker-owned businesses. They have that opportunity to do those things, and so it's very important. I had a conversation with someone out in the hallway earlier before I came in, and we were talking about that. There's nothing against major businesses, major corporations, but we know, again, for the economic people there in the audience and here, we know that it is the small businesses that help sustain. And so therefore, we are very, very needed. And so those collaborations are very, very important. Again, I want to bring in the Eagles Ensemble principles. One being Imani, very important to me, that's my daughter's name. Faith. We have to know that the universities have faith in us to be able to do those things. But again, putting our voices into action and not talking theory, but again, let's join those that are around. For us at North-Flint Food Market, we are only one of 2 Black-led cooperative grocery stores in the state. That's a good thing, but it's not a good thing because we should have more. And so in order to have that sustainability and have that success, we need to have those collaborations from all entities, as you said earlier, government, but also local municipalities, again, universities, other funders and people that have that have some things that we lack in everything. And so I would say that. And again, just the fact that education is at the core of everything. I think we couldn't be where we were without having education. And so that background, I'm always going to stand on that as a foundation. So that's the biggest thing that I see the universities being able to help with, is educating more. This right here, as my colleagues have said, this is phenomenal. This was so needed. And I thank you all, and Jacob over there, and Jason, and everybody, and Kim. Thank you all for having this, because this was vital today.
Just to bounce off really what everyone was saying, I think, unfortunately, I am a Michigan State recent grad. Sorry, y'all, don't throw tomatoes at me. But I am.
It's really okay.
But from the student engagement portion of it, you know, our senior year, we do have to complete an internship in order to graduate. You need a certain amount of credit hours to do so. I believe that businesses surrounding Flynn play an essential part in that. Say you're an urban food planning major and you wanted to shadow our general manager, Patricia, or speak to the national co-op grocer rep on day-to-day operations of the store, or do a research study that you could publish your findings to promote awareness of cooperative economics. Each one of these opportunities lie at the feet of the store, and the great thing about the co-op is you have access to the entirety of its staff. Volunteer opportunities are also there for outreach events with our recent hire, our outreach coordinator, Jamar. He's been great, and getting as many people out there as possible at one time is really a goal of outreach. We want to get the message of the North-Flint Food Market far and wide, so that's an opportunity that students have at the university here with the co-op.
Thank you so much. We have around 10 minutes. I mean, Jacob, is it okay? Can we take a question or two? Does anyone, please, in the front, and loudly, you can introduce yourself.
So I was speaking with these two fine women. The North Flint Food Market is actually something I've been following for quite a while. Myself, I'm a history alum from UM-Flint. I've also got an education degree, culinary degree. Flint Food Market, I've been watching you guys. One thing I do want to ask though, and it's something that I've been seeing when I was following you on social media, is how do we get the community trust? There are people on your page that comment, this place is gonna be looted in the first week. And that seems to be such a huge thing that people are agreeing, oh yeah, they're coming to the wrong place, they're gonna be looted, they're gonna be out of it. There's like no faith in the community, it seems. There are, I'm not saying none, but the louder voices are the ones saying that you guys are gonna be done before you even start. They don't realize you've been working on this for 10 years also. I don't believe that. I think that you guys need to go. I would like to help out myself. But how do you get that community trust? How do you get those people involved? My idea is like you said, you're getting people in the community around you involved. Like, are they going to look out for your business too? Are they going to say, look, this is our place. We're standing up. We don't I don't want to say the criminal element. Okay, it just. How are you going to get past that? I really want to see this. I really want the community, and this is going to extend to everything else, all the other co-ops and everything. How does the community have trust in this? Because we can sit in this room, we all got degrees, we all got these high ideals, we got $10 words. They don't trust us. Where does people with ideas come in? And we're going to tell them this, and we're going to leave in the next 10 days or 10 years or whatever. We're going to leave. How do we get that trust? How do we get them to say, look, this is our community too. These people are doing the right thing. We need to help them. We need to change this negativity into positivity.
There's a model, there's a book by Patrick Lencioni called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it starts with the layer of trust.
Okay.
So one of the things you said, we've been doing this for a while. We have. We've been building for a while. And for 10 years, we've been working on the trust. We know we're going to have some people, some naysayers. They're the outliers.
Okay.
And so we know that we have those, but what we do have and what our foundation is on, we have almost 1,000 members that do trust us, that do believe in us, and they are going to have a louder voice. And so one of the things that because we do know that, as she said, we worked with NCG. We're working with them right now. So they're consultants that's working with us. They have over 176 co-ops across the country. And so because we know some of those things, we've already put some of those things in front. But also, one of the things that Taylor does is she's very active, I was gonna say active. She's very active in the community. So we go door to door. We go to different places. We position ourselves on purpose because we know we have to have that first foundation, which is results. And if you read the book, the top layer is, or if you ever been trained in it, the top layer is results. So we know we want to get your results. So we know we got to start with trust first. So we've been building that for the past 10 years. And we've been building it by having transparency. So we meet once a month, and once a month, we're very transparent about everything. Now, as far as the actual structure of the building, you better not try us, because we got some stuff over there. No, the building it's very, it's okay. Across the street is Eagles Nest Academy. So North Flint Reinvestment Corporation started that first. So I used to be the principal over there. And same thing, people said, you're going into Flint, you're gonna work in? Yes, I am. What I did was go knock door to door, walked all the way around the community, got the community buy-in. We did not have vandalism. We did not have, I think in all the years, we might have had one issue that we had. We had the playground vandalized, and then after that, we got a new playground, and we talked to the young people in the community, and we made them our partners, and we built that trust. And so that's the same thing that we're doing with North Flint Food Market. We're building the trust of the people, because remember, we're not just saying this. We believe in these Ngozi Saba principles. So we believe in it, and because we believe in it, we're going to make sure that the people are heard and the people are first. And we say one voice. And so we have one voice. They come out to the meetings, and North Flint Food Market is going to be okay.
I just wanted to add on to Sister Jackson's point is that it just really takes relentless positivity. It's just how I see it. If you are relentlessly letting the negative outweigh the positive, then the negative, of course, is going to win out. People said that the North Flint Food Market wasn't even going to open, and we open next week. So, 6 days. So, in my mind, if you let the relentless negativity win, it will. If you let the relentless positivity win, it will. So, let's be positive, y'all. That's all.
You had a question back.
Hi, I'll make this really quick because I know it's time. I just want to say, first of all, hi, I'm Arjani. Hey. Kudos to you guys for opening this. I want to say, first of all, I love the fact that you guys are opening this next week on my sorority's Founders Day, so shout out to y'all. But my question is, other than the obvious that supporting this market is giving back to the community, what are other incentives or reasons why people should come to this when there's obviously other grocery stores, other markets, other places they can go, online shopping, et cetera, et cetera. So why should people come there?
Sister Jackson, I'm going to let you in, but can you stand up, please? Yeah, just stand up real quick. Show people your jacket.
Show the back.
Yes. On the back or on the side right here, it says, "We own it." And I just think that is really why. That's really our priority and our message is that the North Flint owns this. The food market, the way that it runs, North Flint owns and operates this store. And we really think that is.
And we want to keep the finances in the community. We know what happens in most communities, especially underserved communities, that the dollar leaves quickly. I don't even want to quote now because I don't even remember what the newest quote is. It used to be, like 2 days or so. Now it's very quickly. We want to make sure that we're keeping it within. And so when people support North Flint Food Market, again, we have 40 plus families that live in the community, that work in the community, that believe in the community. And so it's going to keep circulating and continue to be in the community. So that's one of the biggest reasons. But also, there's another offset of this, because we have a third phase. And the next phase is micro businesses. We sit on a little bit less than 2 acres of land. And now the rest of that land is going to be expanded that we can pour now into other people that want to start and to launch. And so it keeps going around and it keeps being circular, and it's about the community. It's for the community and by the community.
Did Joe and Esteban want to jump in on the issues of community trust?
Well, the only thing I would add, because I did work at a
my own food co-op in my community for about 8 years, and we faced a lot of similar questions. That micro enterprise thing is important. There are people who make things and it's not their full-time job, it's not year-round, it might just be seasonal. The figs are popping and it's only that 1 month, right? That you now have a market, a place that can source those things, right? So that's infrastructure, speaking of what it means to really tap in to all of the resources and all the things that the community has to offer. People who make, artisanal, their own bags, their own hats, whatever, like you suddenly have a market that can be food plus, right? It's more than just food when it's anchored by all those families. So I think that's a really important point. The other one is on the opposite side, which is when I first moved to my neighborhood in West Philly, I had friends who said, "Oh, I'm not a member of that co-op. I've got X, Y, and Z problems with them." I was like, "It's a co-op. You can change it. It might take time, but that's very different than any other corporation that you have problems with where there's nothing you can do to change it, right? Being a shareholder doesn't mean you can change it. At the scale of, you have to own, lots of shares. But when it's a co-op, you can get involved. You can change it through activism, through organizing, through community information, by having dialogues, having workshops, by having referendums and votes. By running for the board, from being involved in the board, educating people who are on the board. So there's no downside. Anything that's bad, you can change because it's a co-op. So at a certain point, it's just win-win-win. I mean, actually, to Taylor's point about staying on the positive side, like even the negative things can be transmuted into something positive. So I'm really commending the work that you guys are doing, and congratulations on next week's opening.
Joe, do you want to add something? You don't really have that much more time. So I can end in with you, or?
Yeah, congratulations. I mean, look, the real heroes of the democratic economy are the doers. And these are the doers. And I know we've done a little work on cooperative groceries in DC, and the margins are tight, and it's hard work, and it's difficult to compete on price. But what you can compete on is goodwill capital. And, all power to your arm. Congratulations for what you're doing. I think this is the model of the kind of activity we need to see across the board in Flint. So congratulations.
So, thank you so much for this. You really set a great tone for the opening of the conference. Other people